Okay, and we're live. We've got a very special show for you today. About a year ago, I was doing advocacy in Luton. I've been to Luton a few times, speaking to the locals, and we go to many cities throughout the UK, advocating for Israel and trying to understand what different communities in the UK think of Israel, of the Jewish people. And this time it happened to go south and it got really heated and it turned quite violent. And Ali, the gentleman who's joining me on the call, was one of the brothers who actually came to my defense. Hopefully, as you can see, he's clearly not of the Jewish persuasion. He's a Muslim. And he, along with a couple of other brothers, actually came to my defense and prevented what would have probably been a very serious beating. And thankfully,
I wouldn't let that happen. I wouldn't let that happen.
Thank you. And shukran. And so we have very different views on politics, on Israel, Palestine, the Middle East. But I thought it was a really positive interaction for me because despite our differences, he was willing to put his neck on the line for me. And yeah, as I said before, I avoided a serious beating. So first and foremost, Ali, however this conversation goes, when we talk Israel, Palestine, Judaism, Islam, whatever happens, I owe you a huge debt of gratitude, and hopefully that the people who are watching, whatever their position on Israel and Palestine, whatever their position, hopefully they will treat and interact with you respectfully, because you are somebody who came to my defense as an Orthodox Jew when I was in a situation which could have turned really nasty. So first and foremost, could you just introduce yourself to the audience?
I'm quite camera shy. Hi, shalom, assalamu alaikum. My name's Ali Abu Mariam. I try not to look at the camera because I get really shy. So Haya is part of our religion. So the Prophet said, whoever has no shyness, he has no faith. So I'm quite camera shy. But yeah, 503, I work as a close protection officer. That's my job, work in security. So I'm naturally kind of in people's defense anyway. That's my job. That's what I do. So yeah, I remember when I saw you that day in Luton, I just didn't like the way people were being around you, and I had to come have your back, man. I don't care whether you're Jewish, Christian, you're human, understand? And I just saw this humanity in you, that you do care for people, and you had that love. Maybe a bit provocative where you were in Bury Park at that time, because it is a predominantly Muslim area in London, in England. We had the likes of Al Muhajirun, who were kind of in that area at that time. I'm not sure. I think they're kind of finished by then, but Luton was kind of a hotbed for terrorism. A lot of guys got arrested. A lot of guys traveled to Syria. It was a place where Anjem Chowdhury, I'm sure you're all aware of the famous guy, Anjem Chowdhury. My school of thought is Salafi. We follow the Salafi school of thought. I support if the Muslim rulers want to make an alliance, diplomatic ties with Israel, I'm all for that. I support that because I believe it makes the Middle East a better place. Not everyone will agree with me, but I kind of look at it as in a diplomatic sense, financial sense for the Palestinians. That if Israel and the Middle East countries work together, it doesn't mean I support Israeli policies. That's a different matter. But if it's going to come down to diplomacy, maybe it would be a good thing. But right now, Saudi Arabia, may Allah bless his rulers. I mean, they still haven't said anything regarding this matter. So let's see what happens.
Yeah, and what I'm going to do when I'm talking, I'm going to mute you because there's got a bit of background noise from your mic, which is fine. But I'll just unmute you. It's not an issue. It's not an issue. So yeah, I've muted you. And so first, I think what you touched on is really, really pertinent. Bury Park has a really fierce reputation. And so the EDL, which for those that are watching overseas, are an anti-Muslim street movement in the UK, and their protests often turn violent. The British National Party, or certainly Britain First, a number of different far-right groups had gone to Bury Park, and every time they went there, there was massive violence. And so I've been to Bury Park a few times promoting the state of Israel. And I always say in my introduction video, before I go there, I'm coming to Bury Park, I'm coming to Luton, and we do this whenever we're going to any neighborhood. But it's more relevant in Bury Park to show that if you come here and you afford the locals respect and treat them in a respectful manner, you won't meet any harm. And you can be a Zionist, you can be a Jewish Zionist, and you can come to Bury Park. And if you're respectful, the locals will be respectful back. And that's happened every previous time. This time round, didn't go to plan. And it must have been the wrong place at the wrong time, because within minutes, there was a huge crowd around me, screaming, kicking the stand, throwing us around. And we had a big banner that said, "What do you think of this flag?" And it was the Israeli flag. And there's a couple of Jewish guys, well, really just me and a camera person, there speaking to quite a hostile crowd. And it was in that environment that you came to my defense. So first and foremost, as I said before, thank you. Most people wouldn't have done what you did and put your neck on the line for somebody who you don't know, and you had no reason to come and step in and rescue me from a very hostile situation. I think what would be really nice is to move that conversation along. And so you said some things which actually surprised me. So for those that don't know what Salafi means, it's basically people who try to go, correct me if I'm wrong, Ali, try to go back to the original teachings of Muhammad and the Sahaba, and following the footsteps of the early Muslims. And I think when it comes to Judaism, I'm quite similar to that. I follow in a tradition which is based on the Talmud, which was preserved by the Geonim, which were in Judaism, you have different chapters of history, but most of the laws that we follow are codified in the Talmud. And the generation after that were the Geonim, and I follow a tradition which models itself on their rulings, the authors of the Talmud and the rabbis that came afterwards. And so in that sense, we're striving for the same thing. We're trying to find authentic Islam in your case and authentic Judaism in my case. So in that way, we've got commonality, which is really nice. You also said some things which really surprised me. I wasn't expecting you to say what you said about following the Arab leaders and hoping that, or the Muslim leaders, and hoping that they can find peace with Israel, and that you may not support the policies of the modern state of Israel, and you've got no obligation to support the policies of a modern democratic state. I'm sure there's many policies of the British government you don't follow either. But the very fact that you're willing to strike peace with Israel actually surprised me, because most of the Muslims I speak to, most of the brothers, they have a big heart for the Jewish people, but a little heart for Israel. They're not willing to entertain peace with Israel. They see it as a blemish, as something that should be removed. Some of them peacefully, some of them violently. And to hear you say that actually you support the potential for peace between Israel and the surrounding Muslim states, that actually surprised me. Is that a view in your experience which is common amongst your peers, or? And so I'll just unmute you now.
I mean, talking about the diplomatic ties between Israel and the Arab states, I mean, I'm not going to say the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia haven't really commented on that matter, because they're kind of the head of all the Salafi countries. Well, not Salafi countries, but Salafiyah started in that land from Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. And, we have our teachings from Sheikh Muhammad Abdul Wahhab. I'm sure you heard about Abdul Wahhab, so on and so forth. As for, you were talking about the diplomatic tie. Actually, in Islam, we have this thing, and in Salafiyah, we have this thing about, I don't know if Jews have it, called Aqidah. Aqidah, I'm sure, have you heard of that, what Aqidah is? Aqidah is creed in Arabic. So we have the creed of the early Muslims. And it actually teaches us, and it's from the prophetic hadiths, where the Prophet ﷺ said that, obey your rulers, whether they're oppressive or not, but you obey them, do you understand? Because by rebelling against the rulers, there's kind of carnage and fitna. Fitna means, I don't know if you heard that term before. It means corruption, chaos, mayhem. So us Salafis were kind of strict in, giving allegiance to the rulers, giving allegiance to the Muslim rulers. So if Dubai, Qatar, all these countries believe it benefits the population in that country to have diplomatic ties with, as much as Muslim will hate it, I'm sure that many people do. I mean, this is a fact. I'm sure you're aware of. Many people will hate it, but if it's going to benefit the rulers, and the rulers make that choice, because Wali ul Amr means the leader of the Muslims. So the Wali ul Amr of Qatar, of Morocco, of Sudan, they have a political choice, a reason, in order to establish diplomatic ties with Israel. If they think it's going to benefit the country, we could hate it. Of course we can. Doesn't mean we accept the rulings. We have to love the ties of Israel. We could hate it, but as for rebelling against it, it goes against our prophetic hadiths, because we've seen what rebellion has done in the Muslim lands, in Libya, rebelling against Gaddafi, in Syria, what's happening there. Our Salafi ulama, from the likes of Sheikh bin Baz, Sheikh Uthaymeen, Sheikh Albani, they've all forbade rebellion against the rulers, which we call in Arabic khuruj. Khuruj means rebellion. So if the rulers of the Muslim lands, they say that having diplomatic ties with Israel will benefit the Muslims, then that's their choice, do you understand? And we as Muslims have to say, Samitna wa ata'na, we're here and we obey, do you understand? And we haven't been commanded to fight the rulers, because it's forbidden. It causes chaos, it causes corruption, it causes mayhem. Yes, we don't have to love Israel, we don't have to love the country itself. We don't have to love. I mean, Saudi Arabia has dealings with America. Do you understand? Do we love the Americans? I mean, I have cousins in America. Doesn't mean we have to love the people that we have diplomatic ties with. No, but it just means that we have to get along for the sake of peace and the sake of stopping Iran from taking over the Middle East. Because a lot of Muslims don't understand this, but the biggest threat to Sunni Islam is not from, and this is going to surprise a lot of people, it's not from Zionism, it's from Iran itself. If you look at the plots of Iran and the expansion project that they're doing, and I'm going to say something quite derogatory. Ayatul Shaitan, we call him Ayatul Shaitan Khomeini. The Shia call him Ayatollah. That means a sign of God, but we kind of have this term for him. We call him the sign of the devil. So the Iranian mullahs, Ahmadinejad, Khamenei, Khatami, all these lot, we don't like them. Salafis, we don't like them. We don't, their creed is more corrupt than any other creeds. So, in that sense, if the Arab countries want to work hand in hand with Israel to stop Iranian expansionism in the Middle East, mate, I'm I'm all for it. Do you understand? Because Iran is, I mean, if you looked at the news recently, what they've been doing, the cyber espionage, trying to kidnap a diplomat, I think a journalist from New York recently. So Iran is one of the main perpetrators of chaos in the Middle East, not Israel. Israel has, um, I don't like, I mean, we've actually been told not to call Israel, so we have to actually call them Bani Israel. But for the sake of the people listening, I'll just keep it as Israel. Uh, I believe working with Israel in the Middle East, counterterrorism efforts, um, it'll help. Do you understand? Because Iran has got very malicious plans towards the Middle East, especially towards Saudi Arabia. If you read their books of creed, they actually believe that they're Mahdi. The Shia believe, the Rafida Shia, the Rafida means rejectors. They believe that when their Imam comes, Imam Mahdi, I'm sure you heard that term, Imam Mahdi. I'm sure, have you heard of it? Yeah. So they
Yeah, but
believe.
assume I will have heard of a lot of the terms, but a lot of the people watching are Jewish, Christians, Hindu. Like we've got the entire
Oh my
range
God!
of. Okay, so just assume
You
nothing
make me
is.
more shy now. No, that's fine. Um, so do you want me to? Am I talking still?
I'll actually jump in there because I agree with what Emma said. This genuinely is a breath of fresh air, because for Bnei Israel, the Jewish people, we look at the conflict, we look at the Middle East, and we say, what is going on? Like this, 2020, 100 Israelis and Palestinians were killed, which is 100 too many, but 100. 2021, just north of 300 at the last time I counted, Israelis and Palestinians had been killed in the conflict. Let's zoom out a little bit. Yemen, tens of thousands dead. Syria, tens of thousands dead. Afghanistan, tens of thousands dead. We look at the Middle East and it's in flames, and hundreds of thousands of people have been slaughtered. And the way we view it, the way I view it, I can't speak for everyone, but the way I view it, there's like three major forces there, and we are not one of them. So you have the Shia and Sunni schism. So you look at hundreds of thousands of people killed in Syria at the hands of Bashar al-Assad, at the hands of Daesh, who are Sunni, but they're not representative of most of the Muslims, Sunni Muslims I know. You go to Iraq, Afghanistan. Okay, so there you've got Taliban. You've got in Iraq, you've got the Iranian influence again. You've got Western forces in there. You've got all these forces that have and powers that have led to like hundreds of thousands of Muslim deaths. And then you compare that to the Israel-Palestine conflict, and you're talking a few hundred people over the last 5 years in the same time period. 10 years, a few hundred people. We're talking very low death tolls. And yet, when 30,000 people are slaughtered in Afghanistan in a year, there's no protests on the street of Britain. At the last flare-up of violence, which tragically saw the death of over 200 people, there were 100 to 200,000 protesters protesting Israel. Where were they for Syria? Where were they for Yemen? Where were they for the Uyghur in China? Where were they for Central African Republic? Where were they for Nigeria and the conflicts that are going on there? They're nowhere to be seen. And so I'll speak for myself, for a Jewish Zionist, I look at that and I see the Iranian influence. I see them in Lebanon, which they control. I see them in Syria, which they control. I listen to the language of destruction and war and religiously motivated war. And it terrifies me. And like the West just don't see that. Instead, Jeremy Corbyn's going on the television show and taking £30,000 a year to be a presenter for the Iranians. It just blows my mind how most people, Western Muslims, just don't get it. And so they hear someone who clearly is on his deen, is trying his best to follow the Sunnah, to follow Islam as best he can. And I don't know how good or how successful you are at that. But I can hear it in your language that your religion is what is guiding your decision-making process. And to see someone who I would consider to be religious, with such a rational way of viewing the conflict, for me, it's quite refreshing, because I haven't had this many. I haven't encountered that many Muslims. I've met many good Muslims who I would consider friends. Many I've considered good Muslims who aren't my friend, but I've very rarely encountered a position like yours in the UK. You may be hearing it more in the Gulf states, but certainly not here. Wait there, so I'll just unmute you.
Yeah, that's fine. No. There are quite a few Muslims actually, especially in the Salafi community. I mean, I listen to the brothers in Wright Street. If you know Birmingham quite well, the path we follow, the scholars we have, we're quite ardent in our beliefs that Iran. I mean, I'm not saying this to please anyone. I'm not saying this to, oh my God, I'm talking to a Jewish guy on camera, let me just please him. No. If you look at the intent of Iran, the books of the Shia, they have more hatred for the Sunnis than they have for Jewish people. And this might come as a surprise to you. As much as Iran and Israel have their tit for tat blows diplomatically, verbally, One thing I do want to say though, Joseph, if you don't mind me saying this, just because I've said that I support diplomatic ties with Israel in order to benefit the communities in the Middle East. The last round of war with Gaza, um, yeah, even though 200 people died, I believe that Netanyahu kind of used that war and it failed. He used it to get some political leverage on his side, but it failed. And I mean, as much as I would say, look, let there be a diplomatic relation between the Arab states and Israel, Bani Israel, it still doesn't negate the fact that Israel committed real serious, and I would say this, Joseph, and I hope it doesn't offend you, they did commit real serious massacres during the last Gaza war. I mean, kids were. Um, I'm so sorry. I'm just gonna call my wife because my little daughter woke up. Sorry, hang on. Sorry.
So while you're doing that, I'll jump in. So yeah, I am sure we disagree on. I'm sure we disagree on the latest conflict, and we'll definitely talk on that. And I think one of the things for the viewers to consider is when responding, consider what Ali said leading up to this. So we're definitely going to disagree, and we're going to talk Gaza. We're going to talk the conflict. I'm not going to shy away from those accusations of massacres. This is something that it's a conversation that needs to be had. But don't react harshly in the comments, because Ali is one of the peacemakers. He's somebody who came to my defense. And so all of my viewers, please challenge him, question his positions, but do so in a respectful manner, because this is someone who's earned my respect and who I am personally indebted to. So in terms of the Gaza conflict, so first and foremost, what initiated the conflict? What started the conflict? And you won't be surprised to hear, actually, it was, in my opinion, the hand of Iran. So what happened? Iran orchestrated riots on the Temple Mount. So where Haram al-Sharif in Arabic, or where Masjid al-Aqsa and Kubur al-Sakhra is, they actually Hamas ejected the Mufti, who was a Fatah. I'll mute you as well in case you need to say anything. But the Fatah, the PLO, they ejected the Mufti that was appointed at Masjid al-Aqsa and installed their own one. So this is Hamasniks. This is Hamas supporters in the West Bank organized riots on the Temple Mount. And that really was what initiated the violence. And who controls Hamas? Iran. Hamas bankrolled by Iran, just like Hezbollah are. It's the weirdest thing for me to get my head around, because Hamas come from the Muslim Brotherhood. They're as Sunni can be, yet here they are in the pocket of Iran, and Iran are the ones pulling the strings. So Hamas don't do anything without the blessing of the Iranian regime, because that's where they get their weapons, where they get a lot of their finance, also get from Qatar because of the Muslim Brotherhood connection. But so we'll definitely go on to the Gaza thing, but I think we first need to identify what initiated the latest round of violence, and who had to gain from that violence. And you'll find every time it was Hamas and not Israel, in my opinion. So I'll mute myself now and you can respond.
No, again, I disagree. Yes, I know where you're coming from. Hamas did benefit. Look, both sides benefited. Iran benefited, Hamas benefited, and so did Netanyahu tried to benefit. I think what he wanted, his objective to get re-elected again, failed. But okay, let's say it was let's say yes, Hamas caused the flare up. Let's say for argument's sake that happened. Let's say for argument's sake Iran did one. My question is to you, Joseph. Two questions I have. Israel is supposed to have one of the most prolific armies in the world. Yes or no? Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, I would say Israel is a very powerful in terms of strength.
Yeah, but you have one of the most prolific armies in the world.
What do you mean by prolific?
I mean, the most advanced armies in the world. I mean,
Yeah,
I
would say in terms of technologically, yes, we have an edge on any.
So, if you're, I mean, my question is, killing families at home or kids, you have the weapons. Why couldn't you just send? And this is going to sound, I'm not sounding rude or anything. Why couldn't you just do a ground invasion, fight what was on the ground, rather than dropping deadly missiles that wiped out? Oh, sorry, I'm so sorry, man. Sorry, no, because I've got 3 kids, so they just keep following me. For me, I mean, that's no problem. So I mean, you have one of the most prolific armies. I mean, no, the most advanced armies in the world. I mean, okay, you said to me Iran was one of the causes behind it. Why not just go attack Iran? Why are you attacking Gaza and Palestinian houses? I've been hearing from 2005. Iran is making the bomb. Iran is making the bomb. I'm sure they are. Even Saudi Arabia is concerned about Iran's nuclear weapon plans.
Yeah.
You know, you had 4 years with Donald Trump to attack Iran. It didn't happen. That's one of my questions. I mean, when are you going to attack Iran? That's been the motto of all the leaders of Israel. We're doing it. It's going to happen. You're quoting Psalms. I believe Psalms 83 that says the nation will gather against you and all this stuff. It's supposed to be a end time prophecy where Iran will, the nation will gather against you, and you're going to attack Iran and all this. I mean, why haven't you done it yet? I mean, why are you attacking the Palestinians when, if you know yourself that Iran is their main problem? Why hasn't Iran been attacked? That's something that I don't understand. Like Netanyahu said didn't do it. He, so I mean, that's the question. I mean, the Palestinians are Hamas. Forget Hamas, forget Iran. The Palestinians are bearing the brunt of what Hamas and Iran want. And Israel is just killing civilians. Do you understand? Why not go attack, assassinate the leaders of Hamas? Why not go and why not go and attack Iran's I just don't understand that fact, that why are Palestinians at the end of Israel's weapons and not Iran, who is meant to be the main enemy? I mean, it just doesn't make sense.
Okay, so perfect. So I'll jump in there. So it's linked to the same reason as why they didn't send ground troops in. So whenever Israeli troops enter Gaza, the death toll is considerably higher. So it was it goes into 4 figures rather than low 3 figures, which is where it was in the current conflict. And so if Israel were to go to war with Iran, tens of thousands of people would lose their life. And so Israel will explore every avenue it can before going into conflict with Iran. First, you've got major obstacles. Between Israel and Iran are several nations which are not friendly with Israel. Like for Israel to go through Syria or to go through any of these countries, to move an entire army through there, that's not going to be that easy. That's going to be multiple wars on the way to a war. So just logistically, an actual conflict with Iran is incredibly difficult. But more importantly than that, Israel tries to preserve human life. And I'll give you examples in the current conflict. So what most people don't realize is that in every conflict, the overwhelming majority of people who are killed are Hamas in the Palestinian Islamic Jihad as well in this last one. But they belong to either Hamas, they are terrorists, they are militants. And unfortunately, because Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad embed their military positions in civilian neighborhoods. So Hamas command control center is underneath a hospital. The 2 towers that came down, the Al Jazeera tower, and was it the Al Jallah was the other one? I forgot. There was 2 of the towers that came down. They both had Hamas infrastructure in them. The United Nations, which is no friend, the United Nations Relief Work Agency, which is no friend of Israel, it's manned by majority Palestinians. There's a few non-Palestinians that work for it. The United Nations Relief Work Agency has condemned Hamas for hiding rockets in its schools. And so Israel's faced with this difficulty. What do we do? There is a force, there is a military force on our border, which is threatening us. And so I'll mute you a second, I'll just finish this point and then I'll hear your point. So for instance, in this latest instance, Hamas gave Israel an ultimatum. They said, if you don't remove your police from the Temple Mount, we're going to strike Israel. And that's precisely what they did. They fired over 4,000 rockets at Israel. And these rockets are serious rockets now. They used to be much smaller. Now these are long-range rockets which do a lot of damage. And many of them get through the Iron Dome and they hit Israeli civilians. And I personally know people who lost family members to the latest wave of rocket attacks on Israel. And so I will be the first person to agree with you that more Gazans die than Israelis in these conflicts. So no one's going to argue against that. More Gazans die. But you have to ask why. You have to ask how. And for me, Hamas launched a war, fired at Israel from civilian populations, and Israel's only other option is just to sit back and put its hands behind its back as rockets rain down on the south. And that's no government would do that. No government would allow that. The final thing I'd say is, considering over 4,000 rockets were fired, and the death toll, the majority of those killed were Hamas or Palestinian Islamic Jihad, and the death toll was just north of 200 people. Imagine that in any other of the states surrounding it. Imagine what Bashar al-Assad would do if 4,000 rockets fell on a city. He'd gas. He'd do the most barbaric, inhumane things you could imagine. Yet Israel did everything it can to minimize civilian casualties. And so I'll let you jump in now because I've said a lot.
No, I kind of disagree with some of the points. Some of the points I agree with. I mean, again, it's not about Hamas. It is about Hamas, but I mean, Joseph, I'll call you Yusuf. No, I'll call you Joseph actually. Joseph.
Call me Yusuf. In Hebrew, it's Yosef. So Yusuf is.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I used to call him because I've got friends who are. Yeah, so Yusuf. Yusuf. The issue is here. It's not about Hamas. Is the problem. The problem is that you have one of the most advanced armies in the world. You have the Iron Dome. I mean, how many rockets got through? Do you understand? I mean, yes, they actually kind of hit empty apartments in Israel. I mean, there's videos of Israelis who were hiding behind cars and laughing when they heard the sirens going off because they knew these rockets were actually just. It was embarrassing. Do you understand? What are these rockets going to do? They're just going to land on open surfaces. Do you understand? And as for using civilian sites, I don't doubt that. Do you understand? But if you know Hamas there's gonna be civilians in those buildings, why do you attack them? Do you understand? Even there's been reporters who have said that there's been no Hamas in those areas. There was a guy called Jeremy, I forgot his name. He's worked for the BBC.
And Jeremy.
Yeah, and he said there was no Hamas in these locations. So how do you explain that? Do you understand? He's been there. There's been no Hamas in these locations. Again, I'm not justifying what Hamas is doing. Hamas is a terror group. I'm not denying that. But the Palestinians are bearing the brunt of Israel's retaliations, which are heavy, which are well, I can't find the word now. Do you understand? Disproportionate. Do you understand? For what Hamas is doing. I mean, why can't you take the leaders out? You got the weapons, you got the technology for it. Take the weapons out, take the leaders out, wipe them out one by one. I don't care. Do you understand? Because to me, Khalid Meshal, Ismail Haniya, all these guys, they're just sitting back, getting money from Qatar, while the Palestinians in Gaza are suffering. Do you understand? But they are suffering. There are people there are suffering. Do you understand? The people are dead. I mean, look, Joseph, Yusuf, if I get into the reality of it, there's kids there, babies that have been killed by Israeli bombs, Israeli drones, Israeli phosphorus bombs. So much has happened. Let's just put Gaza, let's just put Syria to the side and Assad to the side because, I mean, you've said that. But the issue is here that, these Palestinians it's not just a war of, I'm not just talking about you dropping weapons on Gaza. It's a siege. Do you understand? It's a siege. It's an open air prison. It's a siege. Do you understand? Palestinians are dying on their way to hospitals. People are dying to get treatment. People are dying on their way to having babies. There have been babies that have been dead in Israeli checkpoints trying to get out of Gaza. You might not kill many of them as much as Assad has done, but it's for sure you're making their life hell. They're living in an open prison. Do you understand? They can't. I mean, Gazans who go out of Gaza, it's hard for them to get back in. Do you understand? It's very hard for them. Do you understand? There's no running water. Electricity is bad. I'm not Yusuf again. I'm not saying anything bad, but the way you're talking about Israel, the military, what they're doing, you're talking as if they're doing such a good favor, such a good service to Hamas, they're limiting their strikes on Gaza. They don't want to kill civilians. The issue is even one civilian is more than is a bit too much. You understand? When you're seeing babies being killed by these weapons, yes, you're going to use the excuse again of Hamas hiding behind there. They're sending rocket launchers from hospitals, from car parks, from Al Jazeera buildings. It still does not justify the fact that babies are dying. Do you understand? If you can't, you've told me, look, to attack Iran is going to be, there's a lot to it. Do you understand? Yeah, so you can't. It's not going to be that easy. Do you understand? But why is it easy for you to kill Palestinians? Because I'll tell you the truth, and it might hurt you, because they're defenseless. And to Israel, to the Palestinians, Israel is a big bad bully. Do you understand? And that's the way they see it. Do you understand? Many Muslims see it like that. Many Muslims see it like that. Many non-Muslim, many Christians. And you came back to the issue of Al-Aqsa, Masjid Al-Aqsa. You said that Hamas caused this riot. Israeli police. If you watch Sky News, there was a reporter who said that Israel is blocking off entrance to Al-Aqsa Masjid for no apparent reason, just to flare up tension. Do you understand? And obviously, Iran will exploit it. Iran exploited Israel's policies on that, and boom, Hamas started firing rockets. Do you understand? And please, Israel took benefit of that. They did not say, "Oh, we didn't want this to happen." They took advantage of it. Of course, they did. Do you understand? They took advantage. Oh my God, okay, Hamas is firing rockets. Let's just show our might. Let's just scare the Middle East. Let's tell them not to mess with us. Let's just let Netanyahu get his ratings up. It failed. Didn't work. Do you understand? But the point is that civilians died. Do you understand? It's not about the deaths you're just causing. It's not just about people dying. It's about people living there in such a state that people are riding donkey carts. In the 21st century, there's donkey carts going in Gaza to take people shopping, families there. People have not got the salaries. People are not working. I'm not blaming Israel just for that. I'm blaming Hamas for that as well. Do you understand? But the point is that these weapons that Israel is using, these weapons that they're using, the level of violence they did. Oh yes, 200 people died, but that's 200 too many. Do you understand? Again, talking about the Iron Dome, that is so. Look, that's really. You had Israelis laughing when Hamas were firing rockets, because they knew these rockets are going to get destroyed mid-air anyway. Do you understand? Where if, for example, Hamas were firing 100 rockets, all 100 basically got shot down, and if the one or two that did get through, they landed in the ocean or in the sea, or maybe just in a football field in Israel somewhere. Do you understand? It didn't do any damage. Do you understand? So Iran loved your response. Hamas took advantage of it. You took advantage of it. Do you understand? It's a big thing. The only people who are suffering from this, not Hamas, not Israel. It's the people in the besieged Gaza Strip. Do you understand? So, I don't agree with Israel's policy 100% on this matter. Do you understand? If there's gonna, that's my view. Yusuf.
Okay, so I understand your position. Well, I'll respond to a few of your points just because you made a lot. So I think the first one is, I just want to explain how it happened. So, for instance, Jeremy Bowen can say what he likes. Jeremy Bowen is one of the most hostile journalists in the world when it comes to Israel, beaten only in the last conflict by Mark Stone of Sky News, who thankfully is off the Middle East desk now. And if you actually look at what happened, we have a video I've made videos on this. People check out the Israel advocacy movement, go to the videos on what happened to the Al Jallah Tower. And what happened was, when Israel takes out a building, which it knows carries a risk of civilians being killed, it does a number of things. The first thing it does, if it can, the only time they don't do this is if there's a high value target there. So one of the leaders of Hamas, then they won't give a warning. They'll just take out the building. Unless there's just, they know the civilian casualties are going to be high, and then they'll call off the attack. But if it's a civilian, like the Al Jalal Tower, which housed journalists and housed businesses, it was a standard tower block you'd see in any city. What they do first and foremost is they ring and warn and tell all the civilians to get out. And we actually have recordings of the owner. You watch them on YouTube. They're actually on our channel, the Salafi movement.
I've seen it.
Yeah, they're warning him to leave the building, and he's begging, "No, please, we've left equipment in. Can we go in and get it?" He says, "No, you don't go in there. The building's coming down." Then what they do is they do what they call a knock on the roof, which is a non-lethal explosive which explodes above the roof, warning them that within the next 5 minutes, there's going to be a strike on the building. And only then will the building be taken down. The building which saw the most casualties in the Gaza conflict, what happened is there was Hamas have effectively built a tunnel network underneath the city to move their infrastructure around. Their command HQs are under the city, the silos, everything is under the city. And there was one road, it's one of the main roads in Gaza, which had a tunnel running underneath it. And so Israel bombed the tunnel, and you can literally look at the explosion, like the craters going down the street. And I don't know what happened, but there was another explosion underground. So this is not my unqualified opinion now. Either one of two things happened in my mind. The explosion underground was Israel either sent down weapons which explode underground to take out some sort of bunker, or there was a weapons styler, or there was something that caused one of the buildings that was on the street that wasn't the target to collapse. All the other buildings remained standing, and that was one of the ones which had the highest fatalities. And it's a tragedy. I agree with you. So the people of Gaza are the biggest victims in this conflict. That we share the same belief. It's just who is responsible. So I'm just going to mute you just because of the background noise. I look at Hamas as being responsible for literally building military infrastructure underneath civilian apartments. They're having they have a technology which they were trying to disrupt the Iron Dome with. That was coming from the Al Jalal Tower. So I look at Hamas. And now I want to just come on to a few more things before we do, because there was three key things I wanted to cover, which you touched on. I'm going to add a video. Hopefully this will work. If you can't hear it in the comments, let me know. I'm watching the comments, but hopefully this works.
And the Palestinian people don't have rockets. Am I right in saying this? We're talking about stones and like fireworks. Am I on?
They're not rockets. They're fireworks. They're enhanced fireworks.
So let me just pull us back into the. So yeah, the main reason I wanted to share that is that this misconception that Hamas are firing firecrackers, and it just isn't the case. 100% Israel has a far more powerful military than Hamas. But no nation is going to stand by and allow someone on its border to fire those type of rockets at its civilian population centers. And as you saw from that video, they got through, they weren't intercepted by the Iron Dome. They hit Israeli cities. 5-year-old child was killed in one attack. They blew up buses, cars. In Luton, an Israeli Arab and his daughter, so two Muslims, were killed by Hamas rockets which hit Luton, which is like in the central district of Israel. And so there's this misconception that Hamas are just you can just sit back and let Hamas fire these rockets because they're not going to do any damage. They do serious damage. They're serious weapons that have been designed by both Iran and actually Hamas now. Hamas have seriously increased their ability to produce devastating weaponry. The other thing I want to do, there's this, is one final video, and then I'll hand it over to you. Hopefully this works. But there's another misconception when it comes to Israel and Gaza, that Gaza is this open air prison, which is just impoverished. It's terrible to live in. And so I want to play another video. This is a video I put together, and I put this video together by going to vlogs that Palestinians living in Gaza had made. So hopefully this works.
There is a land you've heard of but do not know, whose minarets ascend to heaven above, with beauty that can take your breath and breathe life into your soul. Its forgotten beaches hug secret coasts with crystal-crested waves. This is the point east touches west and fuses new with old, where Arabian traditions meets modernity and history is made. Architectural finds dominate skylines, elevating those they shade, where Eastern fragrances fill vibrant streets. A sensual feast awaits. Its magical markets hide surprising treats, both delicate and ornate. Now you've seen this place before, but its essence was veiled and hidden. What is this place, I hear you ask? My friend, this is Gaza.
And so the reason I wanted to show you that is because, again, the Palestinian propaganda machine presents Gaza as this absolute hell on earth. And it's not Tel Aviv. It's not Dubai. I made a video there of the best of Gaza. That's the nice parts of Gaza. You go to Khan Yunis, which has been bombed. It's not as nice. And then but what we have a propaganda machine which presents Gaza as an open-air prison, a concentration camp akin to what the Nazis did in Germany. And in reality, that isn't the case. You're right, there is a blockade on Gaza to prevent the type of weapons you just saw fired on Israeli cities. The other thing you have to ask yourself is, why is the world outraged at Israel? Israel and Hamas are at war with each other, effectively have been since the creation of Hamas. Gaza also has a border with Egypt. Egypt enforces that blockade, but the same level of hostility isn't leveled at at Egypt. It's only focused on Israel. And so just to really sum up my points, because there's been a lot, I've spoken for a lot. Israel goes to great lengths to minimize civilian casualties. I gave examples of how they did that with the techniques, phoning, knock on the roof, etc. The next video I showed you was to show actually the threat from Hamas is serious. These are real weapons that cause devastation, and they're not as powerful as Israel, but that doesn't matter. The fact that they can cause such devastation is why Israel is forced to respond. And the final part is, yes, there is a blockade, but two parties are responsible for that, Egypt and Israel. And what most people perceive life in Gaza to be is a million miles from the reality. And I will now stop talking because that's a lot, and I'll unmute you.
Yeah, nice PR video. Don't know who made it. I'm sure it's Gaza. I know it's Gaza. I will ask you a few questions on that. Just write a few things down. Coming back to the issue of Hamas rockets. How many Hamas rockets hit Israel, Yusuf?
I actually did know this, but I don't know it anymore. I've forgotten it, so I can't say. But it was a large number. More of their rockets actually fell in Gaza, something like 25 to 30%. I can't remember the exact statistics, so people please look it up and don't quote me on that. But I think it was around 25 and 30% of Hamas rockets fell in Gaza, and many of the Gazans that were killed by those rockets you saw misfiring and landing in Gaza. But unfortunately, I can't give you the exact number. If anyone knows how many, he's not asking how many rockets were fired, so we've got 4,200. He's asking how many of them got through the Iron Dome. So if anyone in the comment knows that, please shout. And someone's also asked about Biafra and Rudy Rushman. We'll get onto that. But for now, I'm just going to stay focused on this, if that's all right. 16%, someone says, 650 rockets were misfired, but 9% got through. There we go. We've got the number, 9%. So it's a great thing about technology. So 9% of their rockets got through the Iron Dome, which is hundreds of rockets. That's around over 400 rockets. Rockets of that nature that we just saw.
Yeah, am I speaking now? Oh, sorry. So, due to the frequency of the rockets fired, how many Israelis were killed? Can you just mention that again?
I think it was around 12 were killed. I'll just check that now, though. I don't want to get that wrong. I think it was 12 or 13, but I'm just checking that. Again, someone wants to throw it in the comments, that would help. Saves me time. But keep talking. I'll get the number for you.
Okay. You showed a video. You showed that video. I don't know. I think you're trying to prove that Hamas is not. Gaza is not an open air prison, as I said. But there seems to be a pattern, Yusuf, when every time Gaza seems to rebuild itself, that Israel bombs it back to the Stone Ages. 2008, 2009, 2012, 2014, 2021. Every time Gaza seems to rebuild itself, it seems like Israel seems to bomb it back. So that video may have been made while Gaza rebuilt itself from the rubbles of war, and then maybe a couple of weeks later, Israel just smashed it again. So, attacking journalists, the reason why I'm looking down, I'm just writing things as I'm talking. Attacking journalists, attacking Al Jazeera buildings. These are all crimes, aren't they? To attack journalists, to attack all the people. As much as even, who was it? There was a person who said that there was nothing linked to Hamas in the Al Jazeera towers in Gaza. It was still knocked down. Family houses that were residential buildings knocked down. So these videos are showing that the Palestinians are living it's not Dubai, it's not Kuwait, it's actually Gaza. That could easily be a video that was made during the rebuilding process. Palestinians, what you showed is like, look, Palestinians living life. They deserve to live life. They deserve to go to shopping malls. They deserve to eat at nice restaurants. But every 2-3 years, Israel is going to bombard it again. Really, it's psychologically, it's going to mess them up. Do you understand? So,
I'm going to say one thing. I'll just jump in just because it will really help. I would encourage you and everyone watching this to get on Google Street View and just go for Gaza. See it for yourself. Go. If you speak Arabic, which many Muslims do that are watching, go watch some of the vlogs that Palestinians are making today of their life, like today, and walking around. The malls that were photographed, they're still there. They're still standing. The masjid still standing. The courts still standing. The hospitals still standing. All of those buildings, they're still standing. And Palestinians in Gazans are making vlogs of them, which you can watch on YouTube. Just Google Gaza vlog and just watch what people are doing. See what their life is actually like, rather than what propaganda. And you're right. I created that video with an agenda, and I say it at the end of the video. And I took the best of Gaza, not the worst. But I think all of those buildings are still standing.
So you were the producer of that video, okay? Can I just say, you mentioned about the rooftop. When Israel drops a bomb, it doesn't explode on the building, but it just explodes in the air. Just give a warning. Do you remember Shujaiya? I mean, the area in Sejai. Oh, I forgot that name in Gaza. Shujaiya. I can't pronounce it.
Yeah.
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 Did Israel do any double tap bomb airstrikes during that period?
Truthfully, I don't know. I would assume so, but I can't say that because I don't know.
Double tap airstrike.
Yeah. So double tap is, I think, is a shooting thing. I think it's a roof.
Yeah. But Israel did that quite a lot. So as soon as Palestinians will go to rescue, Israel will airstrike the same area. Do you understand? So this is one of the Israeli can I say war crimes? Yeah, war crimes that they've committed where people have been bombed, rescuers have gone to help out. Like Assad, when the rescuers do go help, Israel's bombed that same location again, and this is documented. I mean, your viewers can look into it themselves, where Israel has double tapped. They've double tapped gatherings where Palestinians were bombed. Rescuers went in, bombed again. It's crimes on the crimes. I mean, you showed this video about these massive Hamas rockets. I mean, compared to what the arsenal that Israel has, I mean, mate, you said it yourself. Like only 9% hit Israel. Do you understand? These weapons were stopped. I mean, look, you can show these glossy videos of Hamas rockets, but really, it's nothing compared to what Israel can defend. Israel has done itself. Do you understand? I mean, for God's sake, you have the Iron Dome that stops 90% of these attacks, and one or two gets through. I mean, I'm not saying it's right, because maybe there are indiscriminate these bombs, but so what? Israeli airstrikes. You could say to yourself, "Oh no, we only attack the targets where Hamas is firing the rockets from." But let's look at the reality: is that civilians and babies are being killed. Do you understand? Like, how many children from 2008 to 2021 have been killed by Israeli airstrike? Let's put Assad to the side. We know that tyranny of Assad. We know the tyranny of all these of that certain individual. But with the most advanced army in the world, you know, you're still destroying buildings. You're still killing kids. I mean, Al Shifa Hospital in Gaza, they couldn't cope with the amount of casualties they had. Do you understand? And it was. I mean, is Israel helping that hospital out? Did Israel take any patients in? Did Israel send any doctors into Al Shifa? I mean, I don't expect them to send any doctors, but has Israel helped Gaza medically?
I'll tell you something that will surprise you to that effect. And I can pull up some headlines if you want, but I really don't need it because anyone can Google this and find it. Hamas families, they're like the leadership of Hamas, their families are regularly treated in Israeli hospitals. There are many border crossings from Gaza every year. Again, I can get you the exact number. I used to know it off the top of my head. I don't know, it's old age as it all goes out now. But there are many border crossings for people seeking medical attention from Gaza and the West Bank in Israeli hospitals. And then you have to flip that round the other way and look at the Gaza hospital. In Gaza, you've got Hamas headquartered under the hospital. It's crazy. Like, you go on WikiLeaks. It was reported in WikiLeaks. They recorded this as, I think it was the Americans, saying that literally Hamas are stationed under the hospital. And so I think this is all kind of tangents. There's so many different places we can go with this. But I think the thing to pull it back to is why? Why is there a conflict? What are Hamas doing? Israel pulled out of Gaza in 2005. Yeah? Israel, disengaged from Gaza. What was the first thing Hamas did? They drove out their political opponents, Fatah. They dropped them from roofs. They chased them out in boats, and Israel actually helped rescue them. But the first thing they did was they drove out their political opponents. The next thing they did was launch over tens of thousands of rockets at Israel. Tens of thousands of rockets. They literally used Gaza as a launch site to attack Israel. Israel wasn't attacking Gaza. Israel had disengaged. That should have been a springboard for peace, not a springboard for war. And this isn't even a Muslim Brotherhood type thing, because Hamas were born out of the Muslim Brotherhood. But you have obviously the party in government at the moment in Israel. There's an Arab party in government, which is not too dissimilar from the Muslim Brotherhood in religious outlook. So not too far from Hamas. You have two branches. You have the southern branch and the northern branch. The northern branch is more extreme, but they're all of the same sort of creed. And Israel is able to make peace with its Muslim citizens, or the Israeli Jews are able to make peace and share the state with their Muslim citizens. In Israel, pre-67 borders, or pre the Green Line, or over the Green Line, let's say, in Israel, Arabs have complete equality with Jews. You have Arab judges sending Jewish prime ministers and Jewish presidents to jail. The highest performing group in education in Israel are religious Christians. The Arab Christians are the highest performing group. There is complete equality. So Israel can coexist with Muslims. We know this. Or Israeli Jews can coexist with Muslims. And they're doing that. You have complete equality in Israel. But what's happening in Gaza is something different. Hamas' objective is to drive the Jews into the sea. It's actually worse than that. It's a genocide of the Jews. And they justify it. They cloak it in religious language. They quote the hadith that talks about the end of times when the Jew will hide behind a tree. And so I think rather than getting caught up in all the details, because we clearly get our news and our knowledge from very different sources, and we're not going to agree. I don't believe that Israel strikes, waits for a medical team to come in and then strikes again, because that just goes against every single video I've ever watched from the conflict. So we're probably not going to convince each other of that. But what we can probably talk about is why. Why are Hamas firing on Israel? Why are Hamas trying to bring about the destruction of Israel? Israel has the means to destroy Hamas. It could drop a bomb on Gaza and absolutely obliterate, devastate the people there, but it doesn't do that. I don't think Hamas would be as... I think if the shoe was on the other foot, Hamas would cause devastation in Israel, and we would see a genocide of the Jewish people, or at the very least, an ethnic cleansing of the Jewish people from that region. I'll let you jump in now.
You spoke about ethnic cleansing. Okay, I'm just gonna move away from Hamas for a bit here. I wanted to ask you a question. Did you watch this video of a Palestinian father? I think it was yesterday or the day before. Who he was forced to destroy his own home while his daughter slept in a car. Being a father of a 7-year-old daughter, Maryam, that's her name, the mother of Jesus, Maryam. I know you don't believe in him, but I'm just going to say that anyway. Morally, where did Israel get that right that you can remove people from their houses, get a father to destroy his own home while his 7-year-old princess sleeps in the car? Explain that to me. What Zionists do. I don't say in a derogatory way, but as you say, call yourself that. They kind of use Hamas. That's their launching pad to do what they believe. You've quoted sayings of, I believe, maybe Yasser Arafat, who said, chase the Jews to the sea. There's a hadith that says, about the Jews being, a Muslim would say, Stone would say, oh, Muslim, the Yahud behind me. Yahud, for the listeners, I'm sure you know, Yusuf, what Yahud is. Yahud in Arabic means Jews. Nasara means Christians. So just to get that across. So I just want to ask you, you said you mentioned, so that question about a father being forced to destroy his own home, is that morally correct according to the Torah? Do Jews believe in a biblical war with Islam? Does it mention that in the Torah there'll be a war with, not Islam itself, but with non-Jews in the end of times? It's very easy for evangelical Christians and Jewish Zionists to quote hadiths, but I want to know today, is there anything in the biblical scriptures that mentions of an end-time war, Armageddon, with people in that land. I want to know also your view on the settlers who the expansion that's happening in the West Bank of Palestinian homes that are being uprooted. Um, all these questions. I mean, we've gone back to Hamas a few times. I think that's kind of a launching pad for Zionism. They use that as a launching pad to for the arguments. But a father being forced to destroy his own home, Jewish settlers who are burning Palestinian crops, farms, livelihood, Palestinians being forced out of their homes in the West Bank, in Jerusalem, in Al-Quds. Al-Quds, for your followers, is Jerusalem in Islam. So again, I just want to clarify one thing. I'm not anti-Jewish, Yusuf, you know this. I'm not, I respect Jews because our Prophet taught us that there's a man who walked past and he died. There was a funeral, and it was a funeral of a Jewish man. And the Prophet got up, Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. He got up, and the companions were kind of amazed. They're like, it's the body of a Jew. And the Prophet said, but it's a soul. That body had a soul. So he respected the Jews. He didn't. We could talk about Khaybar and all these other things later on. We could come back to that one day. Well, these questions for you, Yusuf. Do Jews believe in a biblical war and end times with the people they're currently facing conflict with? What's your moral view of a father being forced to destroy his home in the middle of the night, not even daytime, while his daughter slept in a car? For your viewers, how would they see that morally? Is that correct? Why do Jews believe that they have the right to kick out Palestinians from their houses who have been living there for over many, many years, decades, years, centuries? So these are some of my questions for you. So if you could maybe shower some light onto that.
Cool. So I think so. Judaism, actually, before going into Judaism, let's deal with the ethnic cleansing question, because I think that's much more pertinent. Nobody wants to see any family evicted from their home. There's just evictions happen around the world, and they're horrible. You get people evicted because they don't pay rent. You get people evicted because they construct illegally. What I'm going to show you again. I've got a video for everything, so what I do, but I'm just going to fast forward into a part of this video because it actually touches on the area we're talking. So the area we're talking about at the moment is a place which Arabs call Silwan. And so I'm going to now check on a video. Bear with me.
Palestinian propagandist made this claim.
In 24 hours, 1,500 Palestinians in the city of Silwan will be made homeless.
That was 7 days ago, so what happened the next day? Well, instead of evicting 1,500 Palestinians, Israel removed one tin shack. But like most lies, there's a kernel of truth here. In Silwan, two areas, Gan HaMelech and Kafar HaShiloach, face potential evictions. Gan HaMelech is believed to be King Solomon's famed garden, where he wrote the Song of Songs. Today, it's a rundown Arab neighborhood, but for centuries it looked like this. Aerial photos show no one lived there under Ottoman, British or Jordanian rule. When it came under Israeli control in '67, it was designated a national park because of its historic importance.
So I just want to pause this just because I'm going to elaborate a little bit. So the shots you've just seen are going back to the Ottoman period. And up to this is 67. So for the history of this particular region, this is just on the border of the old city of Jerusalem. So the old city of Jerusalem is where you have Haram al-Sharif, the Temple Mount. Just running so originally running up to the Temple Mount, but then running down the side is a place called Ir David, the city of David. This is King David's biblical city, and you can go there and you can see the archaeology. And this, you can see, on the top left, on the left-hand side of the images where Ir David is, and the old city is a bit further back. Now, what happened was this area Ir David was purchased by, I think, Baron Rothschild in 1865. And so this was Jewish land. You have on the imagery you're looking at the moment, this was a public garden or a public green space for centuries because it was Solomon's garden. Yeah, so you had David City and Solomon's garden, and it remained this like olive grove green space with nobody building there. The bottom of the image, or on the right hand side, there's actually a place called En Rogel, which is a religious place for Jews. Again, it features in the Torah. And so this is a very biblical, very important site, which had been preserved as a green space for centuries. What I'm now going to play is just what happened.
They should have prevented any building, but it didn't.
So in 1967, Israel liberated, we would say liberated Jerusalem. So in 1948, Jordan conquered the old city, and they drew an artificial line along that city and said you've got East and West Jerusalem. The Jews are on West Jerusalem, and the Israelis, and the Arabs or the Jordanians are in East Jerusalem. So during the entire Jordanian occupation of this region, not one house was built on Solomon's garden, which we call the King's Garden, Gan HaMelech. Not one house was built it. When Israel then conquered it, or not conquered it, sorry, liberated it. When Israel liberated Jerusalem and drove the Jordanians out after the 67 war, what happened was Arabs started building on this biblical site. And so I'll continue. This is an aerial shot from 92. You can already see there's a number of structures in there. What happened
during the 90s, Arabs threw up.
This is now 2001. So you can see there's been massive construction here.
Dozens of illegal structures. This is the area today.
And that's it today. And so when people talk about the demolitions in Silwan, they're talking about these illegal structures that were built on a site of serious archaeological importance for the Jewish people and for the globe, for the world. This is believed to be King Solomon, alayhi salam, is believed to be his garden. Like it's of serious historic importance. Now imagine someone went to Hyde Park or the Vatican City and built a shanty town in St. Peter's Square, or built a shanty town on top of Hyde Park or Stonehenge, or better yet, we went to Mecca and Medina, and on the outskirts of Haram, I think it's called, what's the noble mosque called with the Kaaba in it? It doesn't matter. But sorry, I muted you. I'll bring you in a second. Imagine somebody built on top of that. The Jews came and built a shanty town on there. People would be like, "What are you doing, guys? This is where the Prophet of Islam. This is where he prayed. The Muslims believe this site was built by Ibrahim alayhi salam, Abraham Avinu, or for Abraham." People wouldn't tolerate. No one would tolerate it. Yet somehow, when it happens in Silwan, people are looking at Israel and they're saying, how can they do this? How can Israel evict people from these houses? But these houses were built while the territory was under Israel, really in a 10-year period in the 90s, illegally constructed in a land grab, in a place of huge historical significance, in a green space. It was ruled a green space when Israel liberated the land in 67. And yet all these illegal structures were thrown up. What would you expect any other nation to do? And I'll unmute you now because I said a lot.
You said about shanty towns. Those houses, whether they were shanty towns or not, they were homes of people. This is one thing you have to understand. King Solomon's gardens. I mean, King Solomon is not here anymore. I mean, yeah. So, I mean, biblically, is it allowed? I mean, what significance, I mean, does that area have? And apart from it being King Solomon's garden and where he wrote the Song of Songs, as you've said, is it forbidden in the Jewish text if someone built their houses there to live there as with families who've settled their lives there? I mean, what is so bad about them living there that you had to kind of evict them out of it? That's one question I have. There's a few things. I mean, there's a few questions. I mean, I'm not saying you dodged them. Maybe you haven't remembered them. Palestinians being removed from their houses in the middle of the night and being told to destroy their own houses. Morally, Yusuf, I'm asking you, is that correct from the Torah? Forget the Song of Songs. Forget I'm not telling you.
So in Judaism, theft, whether it's carried out by a Jew or a non-Jew, is not allowed, and it would be that property wasn't the East Jerusalem Arabs' property to build on. If I came to your garden, built a house, and you went to evict me, I'm sure the Quran and the Sunnah would say that's permissible. To if I build illegally in your garden, I'm not allowed to do that. I have no right to build there in the first place. These aren't ancient Palestinian communities. This was a new neighborhood that was illegally constructed in a land grab. However, there's no way of getting around it. What's happening in Jerusalem between both the Israeli Jews and the Arabs is a land grab. Like different parties are building in their respective areas. This particular place where they built, they had no right to build there. It was a place of huge religious significance. I repeat it. It would be like Jews building their houses on the just adjacent to the Kaaba. Like nobody, Jews aren't even allowed to step foot in the Kaaba. We're not allowed to Mecca or Medina. Never mind building an illegal neighborhood there. We're not allowed there. So what does Islam say about a Jew? Islam, the Hadith says a Jew can't even go there. Never mind build illegally. And so all I would say is that I have a genuine sympathy for every Palestinian or every Arab that lost their house or may lose their house in this current situation. But there have been so many attempts to find results. So one final thing, and then I'll let you get in. So with Gan HaMelech, this has been going on for decades now. And one of the proposals by Nir Barkat was the previous mayor was to house all of these people in brand new apartment blocks just like around the garden, and they turned it down. There were other opportunities. There's another area just on the hill overlooking it, which is Kfar Shloach, which is a different dispute. That was an Al-Jewish community, which has been disputed now. And compensation was offered. There's been so many attempts to find like solutions which don't see Palestinians or Arabs on the street, but they've been rejected. And at some point, the courts have to say, well, you have no right to build a house on here. And if you're not going to take one of the many offers that have been put on the table, then the house is going to have to come down. And unfortunately, you will be out of a house. And everybody sympathizes with anyone who loses the house, whether it's in the UK, whether it's in America, whether it's in Israel. But evictions happen around the world. They're not nice. They're not war crimes. They're not the greatest human rights disasters, catastrophes. They're just really horrible things for individual families to go through. But in this instance, I'm sure most people watching this can understand why this is happening.
Okay. Again, Yusuf, you mentioned a few times that evictions happened. Evictions happen when people don't pay their rent, when people have been damaging the house, whether it's a rented property, council, mortgage, whatever. Do you understand? Apart from the Temple Mount being of religious significance to the Jews, I haven't read anywhere where a garden that belonged, where a prophet or Sulaiman wrote his Song of Songs, where it's forbidden in the Torah, and where that people can't live in that area. I don't know. I'm kind of baffled with that. Do you understand? As for you mentioned about Mecca and Medina being forbidden to the Jews, no, the Jews are allowed to enter Mecca and Medina. But as for Haram al-Sharif, Medina, the Prophet's Masjid, that area, and the Kaaba, that's forbidden. That is totally forbidden to the Yahud and Nasara, to the Jews and Christians, and to people who are of other faiths. As for entering Medina, entering Mecca for business purposes, for diplomatic purposes, they're allowed to do that. Do you understand? But I mean, the Vatican is in Rome. That's a religious place for the Christians. Mecca and Medina have a religious significance. So, for Jews to go or Christians or any faith to go there and start building houses around the area, of course, because the whole area is sacred. just because a garden belonged to a prophet and he wrote the Song of Songs there, how is that sacred now, and people are not allowed to live there? And you kept saying that evictions happened. Have these people who have been evicted from Silwan, have they been housed? Have they been given compensation to go anywhere else? Has that happened? Has Israel thought of that? And I've asked you, I think, a couple of times, do you condemn settlers burning Palestinian homes? And do you condemn settlers moving into Palestinian homes while the Palestinians are looking from outside their houses and seeing Israeli settlers from America or all these other places making aliyah? I mean, in Arabic we call it hijrah when you move from one land to another land. So when you have Jews making aliyah from different lands and moving into Palestinian homes and saying, actually, this house belongs to me because it says in the Bible that it belongs to me. I mean, whoa! I mean, where does it say in the Bible that you're allowed to move into someone's house while they're living there and share their home with them and have this attitude that, you know what, this is the land of Ibrahim, the land of Ismail, Ishaq, Yaqub, these names, Yusuf, I know you know these names for the guests. Yaqub is Jacob, Ismail is Ismail, so Ibrahim is Abraham. This is the issue that I don't understand, Yusuf, that how morally and according to the Torah, where does it say in the Torah that you're allowed to invade people's houses, uproot them, take away 100 years of their history, and move in while they're watching you move into their properties? I mean, consciously, as a human, how does that fit right with you? Do you understand?
So I think I can bring all this to. Yeah. So I think I can bring all this together with with an answer which kind of ties everything we've been saying together. So I absolutely condemn any Israeli that goes and burns a Palestinian family's home. Absolutely condemn that. Like, there was one tragedy where a baby was killed, and the people responsible are in jail, and they should remain in jail for the rest of their lives, as far as I'm concerned. I free myself of anyone with that mindset. When it comes to, do I think that Israeli settlers have the right to move into a Palestinian family's home? It depends on the situation. And so I'll give you a real example of a family which are very famous at the moment, the Al-Kurd family. So I'm sure you've seen Mohammed and Muna's videos. They go viral. They've got lots of followers. So this is in Sheikh Jarrah. Now, Sheikh Jarrah was built on the grounds on Jewish land. There's a Jewish, one of our high priests, Shimon HaTzadik, is buried. His grave is there, and the Jews purchased the land in the 1800s, and they built a small community there, and they lived there in Shimon HaTzadik and Nachalat Shimon for many years until the 48 war, when the British forced them out in 47, and then the Jordanians denied them from coming back. As soon as Jordanians took that land, they, in the 50s, began constructing houses which they moved Palestinians into. The Kurds were one of those families, and the Al-Kurds were one of the families that were moved into that property. Now, the Al-Kurd family have been in a 50-year legal dispute where they've been offered many different solutions again. First, they were told that if because they'd lived there longer than 10 years, even though they weren't the legal owners of the property, if they paid rent, they would be considered protected tenants and they could remain in that property. They refused to pay rent. And so even though they admitted in court they had no right to the property, no legal deed, so they constructed an illegal extension on that property. Guess who's living in that property today? You know, Yaqub, if I don't steal it, someone else will steal it. Now, he doesn't own the property. He's a tenant there. The people that own the property, the courts ruled, that own the Al-Kurd property, ruled that the Al-Kurds had no right to build an illegal extension there. They didn't kick the Al-Kurds out of the proper part of the house, but that little extension They said that it has to return to the legal owners, and that's how the Yaqub guy came to be living in it, and that's how he became Amin, because he was saying, if I don't live there, someone else will just rent it because you don't own the property. So in that instance, do I think that probably should belong to that extension, should belong to the Al-Kurds or to the legal owners? I think in that instance, the legal owner. And so I think it all comes back to, when it comes to, do I support Israeli Jews moving, or settlers, I think you said, moving into a Palestinian family's property? In some instances, yes. In other instances, no. If it's illegal, they've got no right to be there. I do not support it, and the Palestinians have every right to live there. Now, the final thing, which is the religious aspect of it. Let's ask ourselves a religious question. I'm just going to mute you just because of a bit of background noise. It's okay. You got a very nice family. It's the religious question for me is, how did the Arabs come to be in Jerusalem? How did Arabs, where did they come from? They came from the Hijaz. I think, I may be mistaken, but I think it's Sahih Muslim, which says that, I think it was Umar, said that the Jews aren't allowed to live in the Hijaz. And I think it was Umar who expelled the Jews from the Hijaz. Yeah. And then I think it was Umar who led the conquest of Jerusalem. I may be mistaken there. My Islamic history is not great. But there was an Arab conquest of Jerusalem. And now you have the notable families amongst the Palestinians. So the Husseinis, probably the most preeminent Palestinian family. The Husseinis came from the Hijaz. That he actually claims he descends from the Prophet of Islam, from Muhammad. And you have other families like the Nashashibis. They were Turkmen. They came later. But the Tamimis, they came from the Hijaz. The Arab conquest of Israel. So I would ask you the question, does Islam permit the conquest of Jerusalem by Arabs from Arabia who then moved in and displaced people and took their homes? That's what happened. I mean, Umar also brought with him the Jews to Israel, and he allowed the Jews to return to Har HaBayit and to the Temple Mount. But my understanding of Islamic history is what you're accusing Israel of. I don't believe is happening, but I believe that's exactly what happened. I believe there was an Islamic conquest of Al-Quds. Why is it called Al-Quds even? It's called Al-Quds because it came from Bait al-Maqdis. That's where the Quds comes from. It was short, Qudsi. Bait al-Maqdis comes from the Hebrew, Beit HaMikdash, the temple. Is where our temple stood. And so it was never an Islamic city until the Arabic conquest. And so my question to you would be exactly the same. Does Islam permit that? And I'll unmute you. And it's quite a lot. So actually, just to summarize, just so you know, so absolutely condemn the burning of any Palestinian home by Israelis. In some instances, absolutely condemn the Israelis that would move into a Palestinian home. In other instances, if they are the legal owners of that home, then I support the Israelis moving into that property. And then finally, I don't believe that Israelis just came and took Palestinian homes. But I would ask you to explain to me what happened with the Arabic conquest of the Levant, or the Islamic conquest of the Levant, should I say?
Sorry guys, my kids, you know what, they're gonna go to sleep in a bit because my wife's just taking care of the little one, so I can't really concentrate 100%. Sorry about that. No, I will try to answer your question as much as possible. Yusuf, again, you've just given me your opinions on what you think. I've actually asked you from the Torah.
So just to answer, so the Torah says absolutely you cannot take somebody's house, but if that house is legally yours, yes, you can take it. So the Torah forbids, Judaism forbids taking somebody's house, 100%.
Okay, so you've said that if that someone's taking your home, you're allowed to take your house back. I know what you're gonna say because that land belongs to the Jews. Okay, we'll address that later on. As for the conquest of Umar bin Khattab was a second Caliph of Islam. When he went towards Jerusalem, if you actually see the way he took over Jerusalem, he did not touch the church of the Holy Sepulchre, where he did not go inside to pray. So the only reason, the reason why I'm mentioning this, because it just showed that Umar bin Khattab respected um, the sanctity of other faiths, their religious places. Okay, centuries before that, when the Crusaders came into Jerusalem, they ransacked the whole area, and they ransacked it very badly. So Muslims did not do that. Going back to Salahuddin, if you go back to Salahuddin, when the Crusades happened, he did not kill. As you said yourself, wars happened, people died. What the Crusaders did years before that to the Muslims was nothing, and what how Salahuddin treated them was totally different. As you know, even Western authors, they praise Salahuddin's conduct during the Crusades, how he looked after his enemies, sending fruits and ice to the king of the Crusaders at that time. I believe I forgot his name. But as for Umar ibn Khattab coming into Jerusalem, taking it, um, in Islam, we believe when we take over places, we're not doing it for a worldly reason, and this is something you have to understand. We're not doing it for a worldly reason. We do it because we're taking away mankind from the worship of man to the worship of God. Do you understand? So when Al-Aqsa, the keys of Al-Aqsa came to the hands of Bait al-Maqdis, as you said yourself, came into the hands of the Muslims at the time, Umar Khattab, it came into the rightful owners because you keep talking about that this land belonged to the Jews in history. We believe that from the Prophet Abraham right to the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that all these prophets were Muslims. Um, Hence why the Jews and me and you, we got the same hats on, same sort of hats. We have similar sort of traits, similar beards. I mean, your beard's longer than mine. I had to trim it because of my clothes protection work. But when when Muslims took lands in Jerusalem, when the Muslims went, Umar ibn Khattab, he said, expel the Jews and Christians from the Arabian Peninsula. He quoted the hadith of the Prophet, peace be upon him. But the only reason why the Prophet said, expel the Jews and Christians from the Arabian Peninsula, because at that time, the Jews and Christians were plotting against Islam in the Arabian Peninsula. So that's the reason why the Jews and the Christians had to be expelled. But the Palestinians today that are living in Israel, in Palestine, they are not plotting anything. They're civilians. They are not plotting anything against Israel. They just want to live their lives, go to school. The only people that might be plotting will be Hamas. But again, I'm coming back to my point originally that you are not attacking the leaders of Hamas. You're attacking the civilians, and the Hamas leaders are just walking around, roaming around free. Um, you're not going after Iran. I'm coming back to that point again because um, that's the issue is politically that today, if Israel is blaming the Palestinians for Israel's actions, why not go and attack the people who are behind those Palestinian actions, which is Iran? Why are you forcing all your anger? It's like for example, my neighbor's causing me problems, but I'm beating up my best mate. You understand? Like, mate, you know what? My neighbor's the main guy who's caused me problems, but I'm just gonna beat you up instead. It doesn't make sense. My neighbors caused me problems. So why doesn't it? I'm coming back to that point. Why doesn't Israel attack Iran? I know you said it takes a lot. Um, it's going to cause a lot of conflicts on the way to get to that war. But the main issue is that Iran is a problem. But as for coming back to the Islamic conquests, we Muslims believe that if a Jew is living in a house, if a Christian lives in a house, we're not allowed to uproot them. We're not allowed to take them away. Do you understand? They're allowed to live there. From Islamic teachings, anyone who usurps a land of a person on the day of judgment, that land will be wrapped around his neck. Do you understand? Whether that's metaphorical or that's really going to happen is not the point. The point is that Islam forbids uh, taking of people's lands, and that hadith is not specific to Muslim. Is general. Do you understand? So we're not allowed to take anyone's land. So if we came to a land and we said, oh, do you know what? Umar bin Khattab ruled that land. Salahuddin ruled that land. Now, oh you Jews, oh you Nasara, Christians, you have to evacuate. We can never say this because they're rightfully live in that land. You may say that when the Jews were in when the Muslims were in Medina, the Jews were there originally. They got moved out. No, they did not get moved out. They weren't forced out. They declared war on the Prophet and his companions, and they sided with Quraysh, who were at that time idol worshippers. Do you understand? So the Prophet even made a treaty with the Jews that what, us and you, we would defend each other against the common enemy, which was the Quraysh. The Jews historically at that time did not abide by the treaty with the Muslims. They joined with the idol worshippers in attacking Muslims. So they weren't forced out because they were just living there. They were fought. It was a war, and they moved out themselves because the Muslims became the power base. Islam became the power base in Medina at that time. So, from my studies of Islam, from my religious understanding, from what I know, and again, by the way, I'm not saying I'm not this pious Muslim. So, God knows what the sins I commit. Do you understand? And may Allah forgive me sincerely. But Muslims are not allowed to usurp the property of other faiths. Do you understand? That's totally forbidden. We can go there and ask them. Do you know what? Can we build something here? We can offer them money. Do you understand? But if they don't want to move, we're not allowed to forcefully remove them from the properties. And this is what Israel is doing today. They're literally walking in. There was a big guy. I don't want to say in an insulting way. There's a big chubby, a Jewish man wearing glasses, and he was asked. He moved in to a Palestinian's house, and he said the only reason why, when the lady asked him, that's someone else's house, he goes, well, that house belongs to me. No other reason, no other religious justification, nothing from the Torah, nothing from the Jewish other books that you have. He just, no, this house belongs to me. With no heart, do you understand? So it wasn't that these Palestinians living there were fighting them and said, no, we won't move. They're living their lives, do you understand? But you just come there, and because of your biblical right, we're going to move them out because this is the land of Abraham, Jacob, and Isaac. It doesn't make sense, do you understand? These are, that's just, I don't see it from any prophetic, any books of Moses and Joshua and Isaac in the 5 books of Torah that says that, you know what, remove aliens or remove people from their homes. These are people's homes. And so why can't you build a house down the road from the Palestinians? You're actually you're doing mass eviction of people, not because they're living in your land. It's because the reality is that you don't want no Arabs living in that area because you want to make it a Jewish area. Do you understand? So in Islam, Jews, Muslim, and Christians, we're allowed to live together. Do you understand? There's no problems. Go to Dubai today. The way the Jews are being looked after. The way the Christians, the Christian populations, the Hindu population, the Sikh population, the ruler of Dubai, he's allowed them to build temples, allowed them to build churches. Islam does not forbid that. Do you understand? But coming back to the issue of Al-Aqsa, do you believe, Yusuf, I'm going to ask you this, that it's permissible according to the Torah that Al-Aqsa can be destroyed? Do you believe that Al-Aqsa, if the Jewish government tomorrow said we're going to march towards Al-Aqsa and destroy it, would you support that?
So, okay, would I support it different, or is it allowed? I wouldn't support it now. Is it allowed? I don't know. I would imagine not, but I'm not positive. I can't rule because I'm not a scholar. From a religious perspective, but from a moral perspective, absolutely not. Qubbat al-Sakhra and Masjid al-Aqsa, beautiful buildings. There's enough space on Haram al-Sharif for all of us to share. We could have a little temple there, I'm sure, as well. There's a lot of empty space up there. But there's no reason whatsoever to destroy Masjid al-Aqsa. And there's no reason to deny Muslims the right to pray there. The only people who aren't allowed to pray there at the minute, actually, the only people who are allowed to pray there are Muslims. Jews aren't allowed to pray there. It's horrendous. It's our holiest site, and we're not allowed to ascend and pray on it. But to come back to your real question, and I would bring it back to the Prophet of Islam. So the Prophet of Islam ruled that the Jews could be expelled from the Hijaz because they broke a treaty and waged war on him. I would say, thank God. Thank God that the Jewish people didn't take the same approach with the Palestinians. So I'm just going to mute you just because of the background noise. In 1948, or really in 1947, civil war broke out between the Arabs and the Jews. In 1948, 5 to 7, depending how you count, Arab armies invaded the nascent state, the emerging state of Israel. And Israel, in the territory it held, granted equality to all of the people that lived there. In 1948, 20% of the Israeli population were Arabs, the majority of whom were Muslim. Today, 20% of the Israeli population, more or less, are Arabs, the majority of them Muslim. There are hundreds of mosques and thank God, there are hundreds of mosques throughout Israel, and Muslims have complete equality. We didn't expel the Arabs. We don't want an ethnically or religiously pure state. The opposite is true. The language of our constitution, or the Declaration of Independence, afforded the exact complete equality to minority population within our state. Complete equality. In contrast, what the invading Arab armies did from Jordan and Egypt, who came to conquer land and held onto that land, what they did was expel the Jewish populations. So the Jews were expelled from Judea and Samaria, which was then renamed the West Bank. The Jews were expelled from Gaza. I've got a friend whose family had lived there for centuries, probably back to the biblical period. They were expelled from their homes. So today, while there are 2 million Arabs that live in Israel, there isn't one Jew that lives amongst the Palestinians. I don't, as much as I think it's great that Saudi and Israel has warming relations, I'm not allowed to practice Judaism in Saudi Arabia, I don't believe. I certainly can't practice it in the cities of Mecca and Medina. Yet in Al-Quds, Jerusalem, the holiest site in Judaism, not only are Muslims allowed to visit, they live there. Not only do they live there, they're the only people that are allowed to pray at our holiest site. I'm not even allowed to pray there. And if I do pray there, it's likely to incite violence. Like, how crazy is that? When a Jew worships his creator on Har HaBayit, the holiest site for Jews, the third holiest site in Islam, that's likely to start a riot. So just to really summarize what I just said, Jews did not ethnically cleanse the Arabs from Israel like Muhammad ethnically cleansed the Jews, or Ummah ethnically cleansed the Jews from the Hijaz. Or like the Jordanians and the Egyptians ethnically cleansed the Jews from their land. Or like the majority, but pre-48, following there used to be around 1 million Jews living in the Muslim world. 850,000 Jews were forced to flee the Arab world in recent years. 850,000. There are now more Jews living in Boreham Wood, not even living, there are now more Jewish members of Boreham Wood Synagogue than there are in the entire Arab world. How crazy is that? And so, no, I don't support the ethnic cleansing or the removal of Palestinians from their homes. And we're dealing with edge cases. I can literally name the families you're talking about in every instance. And there are millions of Arabs that live in Israel and Jerusalem, and they're not going anywhere. They're not going anywhere. They're staying there. They have houses, they have lives, they have businesses. They're not getting ethnically cleansed. They're not getting moved. We're talking about individual property disputes. I can literally name the families, the Al-Kurds, the Abu Tors. I can name each one of these cases because there's so few of them. And the proof is in the pudding. There are more Arabs in Israel than there are Jews in the entire Muslim world. And now I'll let you talk.
God, you said you could name the families who have been evicted. Eviction of Palestinians have been going on for a long, long time, since 1948. You understand? I'm gonna quote the old story that the Muslims welcomed the Jews open arms, and the Jews turned against them. Do you understand? My issue is you spoke about Jerusalem, where Muslims are allowed to build mosques there, Muslims are allowed to pray there. You're not allowed to pray them there yourselves. Let's put that to the side for now. But Israel is triggering problems there, aren't they? When Israeli soldiers are blocking off pathways towards Al-Aqsa, harassing the worshippers, walking inside, going inside while they're praying, and throwing stun grenades inside Masjid Al-Aqsa, trying to break the doors down on Masjid Al-Aqsa when Muslims are inside, sending riot police when there wasn't a riot inside Masjid Al-Aqsa. That was an invasion, do you understand? That was a form of invasion. You're going inside there, you're causing chaos. You know, Israel knows this place is sacred, sanctified to millions of Muslims across the world. And the Palestinians believe that they have a duty to defend that area, do you understand? I mean, my issue is, if you think that, this land will obviously, this area belongs to you, Haram al-Sharif, Bayt al-Maqdis belongs to you, then why don't you take it? Do you understand? Why don't you do anything about it? Do you understand? Because your books, the Torah, doesn't forbid Muslims from living in that area. Do you understand? Because there's nothing from your books that says that Jews and Muslims can't live in the area. It doesn't specify it. Do you understand? But as for you saying that when if I went to Mecca today, Medina today, I can't pray there, because in our prophetic books it teaches us that there can be no two faiths in the Arabian Peninsula. Do you understand? The Arabian Peninsula is mainly the sacred sites of Mecca and Medina. But as for other areas in Qatar, in Kuwait, in Jordan, you can have Jews, and Jewish communities do live in these lands, do you understand? Untouched, unharmed. Go to Yemen, there's Jews still living there. Go to Iraq, there's Jews still living there. Go to areas in Syria, there's Jews that are living there. Do you understand? So the Jews are the Yahud, and I don't like saying the word Jews all the time, because I know people it may sound like as if I'm speaking of them as in a derogatory way, but the Yahud, the people of Israel, do you understand? They have lived in Muslim lands for thousands of years, got along with Muslims, stayed side by side. I mean, if you're talking about Umar bin Khattab, ethnic cleansing, I mean, no, it wasn't ethnic cleansing. It was a war at that time. The Jews were a big tribe in Arabia at that time, and they've decided to side with idol worshippers to fight Muslims. Do you understand? The way you're talking about evictions of Palestinians, these people were given the ultimatum: either you stay here, live under Islamic terms, or you can go. They weren't wiped out and killed and slaughtered. Do you understand? That never happened. That never happened in Islamic history, where Jews were slaughtered and killed and wiped out. I mean, if we talk about massacres happening in recent history, the Ibrahimi Mosque massacre that happened in Khalil. I mean, do you condemn that? I mean, do you condemn that, the Khalil massacre that happened in Hebron?
Yeah, absolutely.
You condemn.
Unequivocally, yes. Yeah.
So that rabbi that who was
Goldstein, absolutely condemn it. No.
So he's not to you. He's not a rabbi. He's not qualified to be.
I didn't even know he had smicha, but yeah, no. Have absolutely free myself of anything that he did. I do not stand with him. I do not support anything he did. I support Jews being able to pray and live in Hebron, but I do not support killing innocent people while they're praying. Absolutely not. It's abhorrent.
Okay, so what about those ultra-Orthodox, non-Orthodox? I'm gonna ask. You obviously you talk. There's a Jewish Zionists, but you have your other Jews who don't believe in a Israeli state. I just wanted to touch on that more. You Neturei Karta. I know you said to me once that you count them on your fingers. That's how many of them there are. But some of these men who are from Neturei Karta, they look like they're very knowledgeable Jewish rabbis.
They are very knowledgeable. But they are very knowledgeable, but they're a minority opinion. In the sense that you'll have very knowledgeable ulama and scholars in Islam who belong to fringe movements that study. And so if you look at a Quranist who knows the Quran inside out, recites it, very knowledgeable on the Quran, but rejects the Hadith. or you look at a Shia in your position, like you would look at the Shia as we would call it being off the derech, being off the correct path. But that's like
what about the Deir Yassin massacre? What do you, obviously,
so Deir Yassin. So yeah, it's a good question. So in the 47, 48, 49 violence, there were many atrocities carried out against the Jews, and there were also instances where Jews appear to have carried out atrocities. It was a war.
They did not appear.
No. So I'll let you speak, and then I'll give you my perspective, because we probably don't see eye to eye. And so the Yassin, what happened, to my understanding, and I'm not an expert on this, was you have to understand with the Israel-Palestinian conflict in the 47, 48, 49 period, was as well as being a conflict which involves states, the new state of Israel post 48, and the Arab armies like Syria, Lebanon, Jordan, Egypt. Lebanon lesser so. I don't think they came over the border, but they were still engaged in the conflict. What you have to understand was this was a civilian war, and this was civilians fighting civilians and villagers fighting villagers, and there were horrible things that happened on both sides. And Deir Yassin, I think there are very few people that would say that there weren't in it, like women and children that were also caught up in the violence. But what tended to happen in the 48 conflict was you would have a village would be either some of the worst anti-Semitic violence against the Jews, the worst massacres against the Jewish people, and there were many of them during this period, were carried out not by the big armies, surprisingly, but by militiamen, particularly when in the early stages of 47, in the 47 period, there were villagers that would just go in and they would massacre a Jewish village. There were even when you had the armies coming over, I think the most moral of the, you can call armies moral, but the most moral of the Arab armies were the Jordanians, the Arab Legion. And there were instances where there were massacres of Jews, and there were instances where the Legion came in and prevented Arabs from massacring Jewish prisoners of war. And so Deir Yassin was one of those situations where it looks like there were innocent people that were caught up in the violence. The violence was initiated by Arab militia within the village, but it looked like, at least from all I've read, that the Irgun were the ones who were fighting in Deir Yassin. It looked like there were some civilian casualties, which are unfortunate, and yeah, it's horrible. But the very fact that you can name that one village, it's to say it's like the families. We have to count these individual instances. You have other conflicts like where thousands of people will be killed in one day. Yeah. We can name the people, we can name the villages, we can name the houses, because it's such a small scale in the context of such a well-known war. And so Deir Yassin's a bit of a tangent, because I wanted to come back to what you were initially saying about the Jews in the Hijaz. I'll just mute you because there was a bit of background noise. Imagine, and you can do this as an intellectual exercise. Imagine we removed faith from this. We remove prophecy. We remove Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or Hashem, the God of the Jewish people, is giving a command to anyone. And we just look at the facts. We look at what happened. In the Hijaz, the Jews had lived there for a long time. There was a war, and the Jews were ethnically cleansed. In Israel, Arabs, many of them were recent arrivals, but many of them had lived there a long time. I 100% agree with anyone who says that. So you had Arabs who were living there. There was a war. Israel didn't ethnically cleanse them. Israel didn't enact a law that bans Arabs from praying at our holy sites. Israel didn't enact a law which bans Arabs from being citizens or residing in that region. Those laws do exist. And you're really absolutely mistaken on Jews in the Middle East. There are no Jews left in Yemen. There were 9 Jews. They've just arrested one of the last ones. I don't think there's one Jew left in Yemen now, other than the guy that's in jail. Iraq, no Jews left. Syria, no Jews left. The Jews have been ethnically cleansed from the Middle East. There's only one place that Jews now live, and that's Israel. Morocco actually does have a Jewish community. That's why I said there's 3,000. They basically all live in Morocco. And you have American Jews, like Jewish business people living in the Gulf states, but they're not citizens there. They're just residents. They're living there and they're working there. They're expats. Jews do not live in the Middle East anymore. We were ethnically cleansed. And so I would like you to apply the logic that you're applying to Israel, and then look at what happened at the Hejaz 1,300 years ago. Israel isn't behaving like that. The Arabs and the Jews did go to war in Israel, but Israel didn't ethnically cleanse them. Israel didn't ban them. Israel preserved their mosques, preserved their holy spaces, allows them to pray at Haram al-Sharif when it denies Jews the right to pray at that very site, which is so important to us. Like, if you were to look at that objectively and just say, okay, forget religion and remove that. What's going on in Israel? Arabs live there. In Saudi Arabia and the Hejaz, there's not one Jew there. Not one Jew. And I'll let you jump in.
The reason why there's not one Jew left in Hejaz, Yusuf, because the Jews left. They left. They weren't massacred. They weren't ethnically cleansed.
But we're forced out. That's ethnically cleansed. If you're forced out, you're ethnically cleansed with coercion, with violence.
No, they were actually there was a covenant made. There was a treaty made between the Muslims and the Jews, and from Islamic history, and I know a lot of things that Muslims say is very easily twisted to sound anti-Semitic, and I am not anti-Semitic. Trust me.
No, you saved me. I know you're not. You saved the Jew from violence. You're not an anti-Semite.
Yeah. So you're my evidence. So in case the police or Prevent, because every time Muslims are talking and they say these things, Prevent seem to be listening over, or the police, or even MI5. So as you have more of a privilege to say what you would like, but when Muslims talk about certain matters, which is the truth, we're more under the spotlight, which is sad, which is very sad, because it stops us from having healthy debates and healthy discussions. So it's very dangerous for Muslims to say anything at all, really, these days. I just want to touch on this point before I get back to the real point. Anything Muslims say on social media, anything Muslims say on anything, any topic, any matter, it becomes some sort of thing for the secret services to jump on them. Do you understand? We could be having an intellectual debate, discussion on anything, but as soon as Muslims, the word Jews comes out from the mouth of a Muslim, whether it's on social media, somehow that's anti-Semitic. But it's okay for the likes of John Hagee to say that Allah is a moon god to his ignorant understanding. It's okay for Pat Robertson to say that Islam is a terrorist religion and all the Muslims are terrorists, and so on and so forth. Do you understand? Coming back to your point, when Prophet when Umar al-Khattab became the Khalif, he applied a prophetic hadith of the Prophet Muhammad that said that there should be no two faiths in the Arabian Peninsula. Islam, I mean, I don't know about Judaism. Obviously, you're a Yahud. We believe that Islam has dominance, and this is something that we don't shy away from. Do you understand? We believe that the Islamic faith is a dominant faith. The Prophet taught us that Islam is superior and there's nothing above it. Do you understand? So this is what we believe. Does that mean we go around oppressing the Jews? Of course, no, it doesn't. It doesn't mean that at all. Do you understand? The Prophet ﷺ told us to have the best of morals and the best of characters. Do you understand? So we behave like that with everyone. But at that time, it was a time of war where the Khilafah of Umar bin Khattab. By the way, I know a lot of people have heard about the Khilafah of ISIS. ISIS did not establish a Khilafah. ISIS established something that was totally chaotic. Even Salafis condemn, and we don't support ISIS. I even feel embarrassed to have to condemn that on a live chat, because I don't think we need to, but for the sake of the video, so Prevent or whoever's listening from other guests don't misunderstand what I'm trying to say is that Muslims we don't support what the so-called Khilafah state of ISIS. So just want to get that out there. But coming back to the issue of Hijaz, where Umar bin Khattab, he didn't tell them to leave just like that, or you have to leave because you're Jewish, or you have to leave because we don't like you, or you have to leave because you're sons of apes and monkeys. No, um, no, not at all. Do you understand? They were given a choice. It was an ultimatum in war. The enemy combatants are given an ultimatum: either you stay under the rule of Islam, or you could go. Do you understand? So they were given the choice of either living under Islamic rule or going towards a land which they wanted to go. Do you understand? So uh, if the myth goes, if the myth is true that Islam wipes and kills all the Jews whenever we see them or we hate them to such an extent that we'll kill them. If that was the case, then Umar al-Khattab had every opportunity to kill all the Jews in Arabia at that time. But he didn't. Understand? They were given a choice to either leave or stay under Islamic rule, which the Jews refused. Some of them refused. Some of them became Muslim. Some of them stayed, and they went back. And if later on the Jews moved out from Saudi Arabia, later on when the Jews moved out from Saudi Arabia, it's because they did not want to live under Islamic rule because of their own religious choice, which they were allowed to make. Do you understand? But um, as for Islam, we do believe that no two faiths, um, especially in the Arabian Peninsula, can coexist because it creates problems. So the Jews and Christians, they were allowed to live under Islamic rule, but they always, from history, and again, I don't really want to say all these things on camera. They are always plotting and planning against Islam. This is something I mean, if you look, I'm not saying use of this in a bad, in an anti-Semitic way. Muslims believe this. I don't really believe that the Jews are doing this myself. They may be having plans to expand their borders towards Muslim lands, and I've questioned you on that before. But in the history, the Jewish community has always been siding with enemies of Islam, and at that time, the Prophet Umar bin Khattab had to make a decision as a leader at that time that, you know what, if the Jews live here, they will cause. I don't know if I should continue because battery.
I'm still here. Right, I'm just going to change my background on my camera.
So Umar bin Khattab had no choice but the leader to say, you know what, the Jews have to leave the Arabian Peninsula because they've caused if they stay, they'll cause problems. Do you understand? So as we see today, Israel living in amongst the Middle East, there's problems in Gaza, the problems in Palestine. But Yusuf, I'm just quoting to you Islamic history. I'm not saying that what happened towards the Jews in history was correct. I'm not saying that I'm not supporting any. Am I the only one talking? Is Yusuf here? So I kind of feel embarrassed now.
I'm here. I was just changing the battery. Yeah, I'm still listening.
Sorry. If you're there, I like talking. If you're not there, I feel a bit shy. I'm like, oh my god. Yeah. So Yusuf, I'm Islamic history. In Islamic history, most Jews and Christians were treated really well. At the time of the Caliph, the enmity that and I'm quoting book. I'm not quoting from my own books. In history, Islamic history, that Jews and Christians showed open enmity towards the Muslims and Islam at that time. So hence why they were kind of given the ultimatum to leave the Arabian Peninsula or stay under Islamic rule. This is the crux of the matter, to understand. So, but never ever in Islamic history have I read anywhere where the Jews were forced out the way the Palestinians today are forced out of their houses by Israeli soldiers. I've never read in Islamic history where Jews. I mean, you had the beautiful history of Andalus or in Spain where there was Jewish people working in the Muslim governments. If you look at Andalusia, Spain, I mean, Islamic Spain. Oh my God, it was beautiful. It was such a it was a renaissance. It was a beautiful time in history. Even Jews and Christians. I mean, Cordoba, Andalusia, all these places that were under is Muslim Spain. The Jews thrived. Do you understand? The Jews and Christians, they thrived. Do you understand? They worked in government positions. the Muslims worked worked alongside the Jews. There was no issues at all. Do you understand? If you look at the Islamic teachings, um, you know, I mean, according to the Torah, the Jews, the goyims. I mean, if I'm correct, the non-Jews are looked at as goyims, as people who have no life, who have no right to even live. But according to Islam, uh, the Prophet ﷺ, he lived alongside Jews in Medina at that time. Do you understand? It was they who broke the treaties. Every time the Muslims and the Jews made a treaty, according to Islamic history, the Jews would break it. Do you understand? So, if you go to any Muslim, if you talk about the current Israeli and Palestine and Arab uh, diplomatic ties and relations that's building, a lot of Muslims are skeptical about it because every time a deal is made with the Yahud, it seems like they break it and they neither respect anyone that's supposed to be protected. So a lot of Muslims are angry the fact that Israel and Arab states made an alliance, but Palestine is still being killed. It just doesn't make sense to understand. So in Islamic history, Umar al-Khattab, Prophet Abu Bakr, Umar, Uthman, Ali, they never ever ethnically cleansed Palestinian Jews out. The Jews were given a ultimatum in the sense of you either you want to live under Islamic rule or you could go. And the Jews decided they want to move towards the north, and they did, and they settled in around that area. I believe they moved towards Egypt and all other lands. They didn't want to stand the Islamic rule, which was their choice. So really, in Islamic teachings, we don't really believe in ethnic cleansing. There's no such thing. Never existed. Even if your neighbor is a Jew, you treat them with good manners. Even if your neighbor is a Christians, you have to treat them with good manners. Even if it's your enemy who lives next door to you, you have to show them good behavior. But today we see the opposite in Israel, where Palestinians, ladies and men are being kicked out of their houses in the middle of the night under the belief of that this land belongs to us because it was given to Abraham, and Israel has the backing of the of John Hagee, the Pat Robertson, who funds the Israeli right, who support AIPAC, AIPAC, these organizations, AIPAC. I mean, they work alongside these Christian organizations, these Zionist Christian organizations. I mean, the Palestinians really, if you look at it from their eyes, they really have nobody. Do you understand? Israel's made diplomatic ties with Arab states. Israel has the backing of America. Israel has the backing of AIPAC. Israel has the backing of multi-million churches in America, that multi-million-dollar church in America. The Muslims in Gaza, they feel betrayed. They actually do feel betrayed. I'm talking from their point of view. They actually feel betrayed because when was the last time a Christian commentator from the team from the Christian channels ever said that these Palestinians that are dying is wrong? When was the last time you heard a Jewish individual saying that these Palestinians that are dying? I mean, you had your Israeli diplomats coming on TV, but not once did they ever say, do you know what? We are sorry for the loss of Palestinian lives. They've never apologized. Do you understand? So it's quite sickening. Do you understand? So you have Mark Regev, who keeps denying Israeli massacres, but keeps blaming the problems on Palestinian rockets being fired. But not once has he ever condemned Israel's disproportionate attacks on Gazan properties, on Gazans. He never condemns it. Do you understand? Zipni Livni, another individual. You have so many of these Israeli foreign diplomats that have never ever condemned their crimes in Gaza. Do you understand? So, I don't like this idea of the Jews being painted as they're so oppressed in the Middle East, because really you have one of the biggest militaries in the Middle East in the world. You have the biggest superpower backing you in the world. We have multi-million-dollar churches in America that are funding Zionism with billions of money every year. So really, when I hear this old narrative of Jews being oppressed in the Middle East, you're not oppressed. The Palestinians are oppressed. You understand? They're the real oppressed ones. Let's not keep going back to the history of Hijaz and so on and so forth. Let's talk about now.
So
Yes,
become,
yeah. Yusuf, I have to let you know, I have to go in literally 3 minutes. My wife is waving her fingers like this at me. 3 minutes, 3 minutes. So I'm really,
okay.
I'm
So
scared
we'll
of
wrap it up really quickly.
yeah.
So I'll wrap it up, and then we'll do closing comments. So in response to your charge of the Muslims that believe the Jews are plotting and always plotting against the Muslims, you yourself then brought the evidence that that's not true. So it was Kaula al-Yahudi who led the Muslim armies across the Mediterranean from North Africa in the conquest of Al-Andalus. It was Shimul Hanagid, who was a military general in Al-Andalus, and many. The rabbi I follow was born in Al-Andalus, Moses Maimonides. And so Jews are not plotting against Islam. It's a silly stereotype. It is an anti-Semitic stereotype. And I know you yourself are not an anti-Semite because you saved me, a Jew, from other Muslims. So 100%, I'm not accusing you. But that belief that Jews are plotting isn't evidenced in history because, as you said, Jews and Muslims have coexisted for many, many years in many different countries. What happened in Israel is not ethnic cleansing. What happened in the Hijaz, what happened in the Arab world in recent history was ethnic cleansing of the Jews. You're right, we're not a victim anymore. But that's not because people aren't trying to make us a victim. There are many people, and what a beautiful daughter, mashallah. And there are many people who want us to be victims. You talk about AIPAC. AIPAC has less budget than CARE. In fact, the Arab states are way richer than Israel, have way more influence in the world than Israel. And what you're painting isn't the reality. But I do recognize that we've talked for 2 hours, which I only thought this would be an hour long, but I've really enjoyed it. You're a really good man. It's been an enjoyable conversation. You've got a daughter, which I'm guessing you need to put to bed because it's late. And so I will unmute you, and we can, if there's any other comment you'd like to Dave, tell people how they can find you if you're interested in that. But yeah, it's been really a pleasure.
You could, Yusuf, what I'll do is I'll send you my Instagram. I'll send you my Facebook. You could just give it to them if you want, where they can find me on Facebook. Just to let you know that, I have no hatred towards Jewish people. I know this is one thing I need to clarify, because in Salafi, we don't hate Jews and Christians. We may disagree with their policies, we hate their beliefs in the sense of them not believing in Prophet Muhammad. But as for the people themselves, as for the culture itself, I respect Jewish people so much. Do you understand? Israel has helped in a lot of things in the world, but one of the main, not a lot of Muslims will agree with what I say, but I believe that in the future, going forward, that Muslims and the Arab states and Israel need to work together to confront the Iranian project, which Yusuf, you're very well aware of. Hezbollah is not a friend of the Muslims. Hezbollah and Israel and the Arab states share a common enemy with Iran, with Hezbollah. But the Qasem Soleimani, we didn't talk about him. He was a very bad tyrant towards Muslims. I know we always talk about Ariel Sharon, we talk about Ehud Olmert, we talk about Netanyahu. Not people talk about Qasem Soleimani. He was a very, very big criminal towards Muslims. But we could talk about that next time, Yusuf. All I want to say is that, may God bless everyone. Do you understand? Humans, Jews, Christians, whatever. Learn more about Islam, learn more about Salafiyah, and I hope this brotherhood, Yusuf, me and you, continues.
Inshallah.
This brotherhood between us, and we are children of Abraham. We are cousins in that context. Just live happily, man. Do you understand? If you disagree with each other, talk, learn to debate. And I'm against Muslims who get riled up, get angry, get fiery. they will quote anti-Jewish slogans. I'm all against that. Do you understand? I don't like it. Do you understand? I hate it. And it's not. I haven't found it in any of my research, any of my Islamic beliefs where it teaches us to be anti-Semitic. We can disagree with Jewish policies, with Jewish beliefs, but as to be harmful towards the Jews, as to say that Jews are pigs and monkeys, no. This is this is something for another day. But the Jewish people are our cousins in faith, in the sense of our brothers in in a biological way. We're
brothers biologically, and we belong to the same din of monotheism. We're monotheists,
yes, definitely.
As well. So I'll let you get to bed. Put children to bed.
She's quite heavy, so I have to put her down.
It's a good workout for you there, for that close protection. You get your edge. So inshallah, all people will know peace. And thank you for your time. It's been a really enjoyable conversation.
Thank you very much. God bless you. God bless you, Yusuf. Thank you very much.
Likewise.
Shalom. Take care. Bye.